Once upon a time, there was Tam and Cam who were half-sisters. The two sisters are almost the same age. Tam is the first wife's daughter, Cam is the concubine's daughter. Tam's mother died when she was a baby. A few years later, Tam's father also died. Tam lives with her stepmother, Cam's mother. But Tam's stepmother is a very harsh person. Every day, Tam has to work all the time, taking care of buffaloes, carrying water, cutting sweet potato and picking duckweed. At night, she still grinded rice and pounded rice without finishing her work. Meanwhile, Cam was pampered by her mother, lived in clover, and stayed at home all day without having to do heavy work. One day, the stepmother gave the two sisters a basket and told them to go to the field to catch shrimp. She promised, "Whoever catches a full basket will be rewarded with a red bib." Going to the field, Tam got used to catching crabs and snails, so in the morning, her basket was full of fish and shrimp. As for Cam, she was able to walk from one field to another, until the afternoon she still got nothing. Seeing that Tam had a full basket, Cam told her, Sister, your head was dirty, you should dive down, lest mother scold you." Believing it to be true, Tam went down to the pond to wade into the deep to bathe. Cam took the opportunity to dump all of Tam's shrimp into her basket and then came running back to home. When Tam stepped up, there was only an empty basket, so she sat down and cried. At that time the Buddha was sitting on a lotus throne. Suddenly, when he heard Tam's cry, he came down and asked, "Why are you crying?" She told the story to the Buddha. The Buddha said, "Well, let's shut up. Have you looked in the basket to see if there's anything else?" Tam looked at the basket and said, "There is only one goby left. You brought that goby home and dropped it into the well to raise it. Each meal, worth 3 bowls, you ate 2, and left 1 to give to the goby. Every time you feed, you remember to call it like this, goby. Goby, eat our gold rice and silver rice. Don't eat steamed rice and plain rice gruel from people. If you don't call it right, it won't come up, remember." Having said that, the Buddha disappeared. According to the Buddha's words, she dropped the goby into the well. Then from that day on, after every meal, Tam saved the hidden rice and gave it to him. Every time he listens to Tam's call, he comes to the surface to grab some rice grains that Tam throws down. People and fish are getting to know each other more and more, and he is growing up fastly. Seeing that Tam often brings rice to the well after each meal, her stepmother suspected, so she told Cam to go watch. Cam hid in the bushes by the well and heard Tam calling the goby. So she memorized it and then went back to tell her mother. That night, the stepmother told Tam to get up early in the morning to tend the buffalo, and said, "My daughter, the village has already started banning buffalo. Tomorrow you take care buffalo in the fields far away, unless the village will catch the buffalo." Tam obeyed. The next morning she took the buffalo to eat far away. At home, the stepmother and Cam brought a bowl of rice to the well, and also called the goby to eat just like Tam called. Hearing the call, he floats to the surface. Cam and her mother were already waiting to catch the goby and bringing him back to be slaughtered. In the afternoon, Tam brought the buffalo back, and after eating, Tam brought a bowl of rice and go to the well. Tam kept calling, but she didn't see her goby up like usual. Tam kept calling, and finally saw only a blood clot floating on the surface of the water. Knowing that something was wrong with him, Tam burst into tears. The Buddha appeared again and asked, "Why are you crying?" Tam told the story to the Buddha. The Buddha said, "Your goby have already been eaten. Well, let's shut up. Then go back and pick up its bones, find 4 jars, put them in, and bury them under the 4 legs of the bed." Well, let's shut up. Then go back and pick up its bones, find 4 jars, put them in, and bury them under the 4 legs of the bed. Tam returned according to the Buddha's instructions to look for the gobi's bones, but couldn't find them anywhere. A chicken saw that and said to Tam, "Cluck, cluck, give me a handful of rice, I'll dig up the bones." She picked up a handful of rice and threw it to the chicken. Chicken ran to the kitchen to dig for a while, then it found gobi's bones right away. Tam then picked it up, put it in a jar and buried it at the foot of the bed as the Buddha said. Soon after, the king held a festival for several days and nights. Young men and women in the villages were eager to see. Cam and her mother also bought beautiful clothes to go to the festival. Knowing that Tam also wanted to go, the stepmother wailed. Then she mixed a bowl of black beans with a bowl of green beans, told Tam. "You should finish sorting this beans out and then go anywhere, don't leave if it is unfinished." Saying that, the stepmother and Cam went on their way. Tam sat down to sort it out for a while, but only had a handful, thinking that she would never be able to finish it, and cried alone. In the meantime, the Buddha appeared and asked, "Why are you crying?" Tam pointed to the basket, said, "My aunt forced me to sort this beans out, and then go to the festival. When I finished it, the meeting was over." The Buddha said, "Don't cry anymore. You bring the basket out in the middle of the yard, so that I can send a flock of sparrows to help sort it out. But if the sparrow eats it, you will still be beaten. You keep telling the sparrow like this, 'Come down to sort beans out. Eat any seeds, I beat you to death, they won't eat yours.'" Naturally, in the air, a flock of sparrows landed in the yard to sort black beans on one side and green beans on the other. They chirped in just a moment and finished, without eating a single grain. But when the sparrow flew away, Tam sobbed again. The Buddha asked again, "Why are you still crying?" "I'm so ragged, they don't let me in the festival. You should dig up the jars that were buried the day before, and there will be everything for you to wear." Obedient Tam, go dig the jars up. Digging the first jar, she pulled out a tunic, a silk robe, a silk bib, and a scarf. Dig the second jar to get a pair of embroidered shoes that fit perfectly. The third jar was dug up and found a tiny horse, but as soon as the horse was put on the ground, it suddenly neighed and turned into a real horse. Digging up to the last jar, she pulled out a nice set of saddles. After a quick shower, she wore nice clothes, then rode on a horse and left. The horse galloped in a moment and arrived at the capital. But when running through a waiting spot, Tam dropped a shoe into the water and couldn't pick it up. When the horse stopped at the party, Tam wrapped the other shoe with a towel and squeezed into the sea of people. In the midst of that, the chariot group has just reached the waiting spot. The two elephants leading the group to come here naturally put their tusks in the ground and bellowed and refused to go. The king sent his soldiers into the water to try and find them. They immediately picked up Tam's embroidered shoe that they dropped earlier. The king looked at the shoe without getting bored. He told himself, "Wow, what a beautiful shoe. The person wearing this shoe must be a wonderful girl." Immediately the king ordered to invite all the women and girls going to the festival to try it on, and whoever fits the shoe, the king will marry. The party was even more lively because the women and girls jostled each other to the place to try on shoes. One by one, they pulled into the house in the middle of the wide lawn to try a little luck. But none of the legs fit. Cam and her mother are also among them. When Cam and her mother came out of the stairs, they met Tam. Cam said to her mom, "Mom, anyone like Tam also tries on shoes." Tam's stepmother pouted, "What a daydreamer." But when Tam put her foot in the shoe, it just fit. She opened the towel and took the second one in. The two shoes are identical. The servants cheered for joy. The king immediately sent a group of maids to bring her to the palace. There were the surprised and hostile eyes of Cam and her mother when Tam stepped onto the palanquin. Although living in the royal palace, Tam still did not forget the anniversary of her father's death. She asked the king's permission to return home to prepare an offering for her father. Cam and her mother saw Tam being happy and hated it. Now seeing Tam return, jealousy flared up again. Thinking of a trick, the stepmother told Tam, "In the past, you was used to climbing areca tree. Please climb and pick areca nut to worship your father." She obediently climbed the areca tree. When she got to the top, the stepmother was down here with a knife. Seeing the tree shake, Tam asked, "What are you doing under the tree?" "The root is full of ants. I chased the ants away to keep them from burning you." But before Tam had time to pick the areca nut, the tree fell. Tam fell upside down in the pond and died. The stepmother hurriedly took off Tam's clothes for Cam to wear and then brought her to the palace to lie to the king that Tam had unfortunately fallen into the pond and drowned, and now brought Cam in to replace her sister. The king heard that he was not happy but still did not say anything. After death, Tam turning into a golden bird. The bird flew back to the capital to the garden. Seeing Cam sitting washing clothes for the king at the well, she stopped on a tree branch and told her, "Hang my husband's clothes to dry on the pole. Don't dry on the fence. Tear my husband's shirt." Then the golden bird flew straight into the bough and sat at the window, singing happily. Wherever the king goes, the birds fly there. The king was remembering Tam unrelentingly. Seeing the birds attached to him, the king said, "Golden bird, are you my wife? Get into my sleeve." The golden bird landed in the king's hand, then snuggled into his sleeve. King loved golden bird so much that he forgot to eat and sleep. The king ordered a golden cage for the bird. From then on, day and night, the king was only engrossed in birds, not thinking about Cam. Cam rushed home to tell Mom. Her mother told her to catch birds to eat and then lie to the king. Returning to the king's palace, when the king was away, Cam killed the birds to eat, then threw the feathers in the garden. Knowing the golden bird disappeared, the king asked. Cam replied, "I have a craving for bird meat because of pregnant, so I stole the king's permission to kill the bird and eat it." The king said nothing. The golden feathers buried in the garden turned out to be 2 peach trees. When the king went to the garden, their branches and leaves swooped down and covered themselves in a round shadow like 2 parasols. The king saw a beautiful tree shady, sent his servants to hang hammocks in 2 trees and then lie down to enjoy the cool air. When the king was gone, the tree branch straightened again. Since then, there has not been a day when the king did not go out and rest in the garden. Cam rushed home again to tell her mom. Her mother told her to send workers to cut trees to make looms and then lie to the king. Returning to the palace, on a stormy day, Cam sent workers to cut down 2 peach trees for wood to frame a loom. Seeing that the tree was cut down, the king asked. Cam replied, "The tree fell because of the storm. I sent a worker to cut it into a loom to weave clothes for you, Majesty." But when the loom was finished, Cam sat in and always heard the loom cursing her, squeaking, "Take my husband from me, I gouged out your eyes." Seeing that, Cam was scared and rushed to tell her mother. Her mother told her to burn the loom. Then, take the ashes away and dump them for peace of mind. Returning to the palace, Cam did as her mother said. She carried the burned ashes and dumped them on the roadside away from the palace. A pile of ashes on the side of the road grew a tall gold apple tree with luxuriant twig. In the fruiting season, the tree can only have 1 fruit, but the aroma spreads everywhere. One day, an old woman vendor nearby passing under the tree, smelled the fruit's aroma, looked up and saw the fruit on a high branch. Then she held out her bag and muttered, Gold apple, fell on my bag. I smelled but I did not eat." As soon as the old woman finished speaking, the fruit fell right into the bag. The old woman took it home and kept it in her room, sometimes coming in to admire and smell the aroma. Every day, the old woman goes to the market, From the gold apple came out a girl whose body was as small as a finger, but in the blink of an eye, she turned into Tam. As soon as Tam came out, she took a broom to clean the house, then went to wash rice to cook rice, pick vegetables in the garden to cook soup to help the old woman. After that, Tam returned to the small body again and went into the fruit. Coming home, the old woman found that the house was tidy, the rice was delicious, and the sweet soup was ready. She was surprised. One day, the lady pretended to go to the market, but she sneaked back and lurked in the bushes behind the house. Meanwhile, Tam came out from the fruit and did the same things as usual. The old woman crept back into the crevices of the door. When she saw a beautiful girl, she was overjoyed, suddenly rushed in and hugged Tam, tearing the fruit. Since then, Tam had been living with the old woman. The two of them love each other like mother and daughter. Every day, Tam helps the old woman with the tasks of cooking rice, cooking water, wrapping cakes, and making betel nuts so that the old woman can sell goods. One day, the king went out of the palace. Seeing that there is a clean roadside shop, he stopped in. The old woman brought betel nut and offered it to the king. Seeing the betel nut with the phoenix wings, the king suddenly remembered his wife's betel nut, so he asked, "Who made this betel nut?" "My daughter made this betel nut," replied the old woman. "Where is your daughter? Call her here so I can see her face." The old woman called Tam out. Tam just appeared. The king immediately recognized his wife the day before, somewhat younger and more beautiful than before. The king was overjoyed, asked the old lady to tell the story, and then ordered the servants to take the palanquin to bring Tam to the palace. Finally, Tam was able to live happily with the king. Tam were kicked out of the palace, and on the way home, she were struck by lightning and killed. Cam's mother heard that her daughter died. She was sick and died not long after because of sadness.